My son handed me a paper plate of everyone's dinner scraps at my own birthday party, in front of 30 of his friends, and said, "Freeloaders eat last in this house, old man." That night, I went upstairs and locked my bedroom door for the first time in 40 years. But what I did the following morning would cost him everything he'd taken from me, and then some. Before I get to that, let me tell you who I was before that Sunday in March. My name is Frank Calloway. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years teaching high school mathematics in Nashville, Tennessee, the kind of career that doesn't make you rich but gives you something most people spend their whole lives searching for, a sense that your time on this earth meant something. I retired at 62, the year my wife Carol died of a stroke on a Thursday morning in February, which is the kind of thing that splits your life clean in two. Before Carol, after Carol. We'd bought our house on Clover Ridge Drive in 1991 for $112,000. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a backyard with a tulip poplar. Carol planted herself the spring after we moved in. I'd paid it off by 2017. Carol never got to see it fully ours, but she knew it was coming. She used to joke that the day we made the final mortgage payment, she was going to stand on the porch and holler loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. I thought about that joke a lot in the years after she was gone. My son Kyle moved back in 11 months after Carol's funeral. He was 31 years old and had just watched a tech startup he'd co-founded collapse after 2.5 years of investor money burned through. He showed up on my doorstep on a rainy Tuesday with 2 duffel bags and the look of someone who'd been rehearsing an apology on the drive over. He said he just needed a few months to get back on his feet. Cassandra arrived 6 weeks later. Kyle introduced her as his girlfriend. She had a yoga mat under one arm and 3 suitcases. She left by the front door for 4 days before Kyle quietly moved them upstairs. I'd be lying if I said I didn't know what I was agreeing to. I knew, but I was 64 years old and the house had 37 rooms worth of silence in it, and Kyle was the only child Carol and I had ever had. After she died, I think I confused his presence with progress. I thought if I gave him enough space and patience and financial breathing room, he'd find his footing and turn into the man Carol had always believed he could be. She'd been softer on him than I was. She'd always said he needed time, so I gave him time, 3 years of it. In those 3 years, I paid every utility bill, every property tax installment, every grocery run, every streaming subscription, every appliance repair. I added Kyle to my visa in 2022, when he said he needed it for job-related expenses. I added Cassandra 3 months later at Kyle's request, after she mentioned needing to pay for an online certification course. I told myself I'd monitor the statements carefully. I didn't, not the way I should have. I was a math teacher for 3 decades, the kind of man who balanced his checkbook by hand every month without fail, and I stopped doing it because I was tired and lonely and grieving in that slow, quiet way that doesn't look like grief from the outside. That's the answer to the question I know you're already forming. Why didn't he stop it sooner? Because when you're 64 and your wife is 2 years in the ground and your only son is sleeping in the next bedroom, you tell yourself a story. You tell yourself that this is temporary. You tell yourself that the disrespect is just stress, just frustration, just a young man struggling. You tell yourself that Carol would want you to be patient. You keep telling that story right up until the moment your son hands you a paper plate of other people's leftovers on your 67th birthday and calls you a freeloader in front of 30 strangers in your own living room. That was the moment I stopped telling the story. The party had started at 7. I didn't know there was going to be a party. Kyle mentioned on Friday that a few friends might come by Sunday evening to watch the NCAA tournament, and I'd said that was fine with me. I'd planned to make myself scarce. Heat up some leftover chili upstairs, give them space. I'd been giving them space for 3 years. What I walked into at 8:15 was not a few friends watching basketball. There were 30 people packed into my living room and dining room and spilling out onto the wraparound porch Carol had loved. My furniture had been pushed against the walls. Someone had hung a string of LED lights along the mantelpiece, above the fireplace, where Carol's photograph sat. So the photo was framed in purple and blue neon, like a bar sign. A speaker I didn't recognize sat on top of the bookshelf where I kept the textbooks I'd taught from. It was loud enough that I felt it in my chest before I even reached the bottom of the stairs. I stood in the doorway between the foyer and the living room. A few people glanced at me the way you glance at someone who's walked into the wrong room. Not with recognition, with that particular blankness that said they had no idea who I was, which told me everything about how Kyle had described my existence in his own home. Kyle was near the kitchen entrance, red cup in hand, and when he saw me, his expression shifted. Not embarrassed, not apologetic, something worse, theatrical. He spread his arms wide and turned toward the room like a man about to give a toast. "Hey, everyone," he said, his voice carrying over the music. "Look who finally came down from his cave. My dad. Ladies and gentlemen." A few people glanced over. Most kept their conversations going. "We were wondering if you'd even show up to your own birthday," Cassandra said from the couch, not looking up from her phone. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, silk or something, trying to be silk, and the laugh she gave was the kind that's designed for an audience. Kyle was already heading toward the kitchen. I heard cabinet doors. I heard the scrape of a plate. When he came back, he was carrying a paper birthday plate, the cheap kind with balloons printed on the border, and it was loaded. Loaded with the remnants of whatever everyone else had eaten. A pile of pasta salad scraped to the edges of someone's serving. 2 chicken wings that had been gnawed down. A half-eaten bread roll. A smear of something that might have been hummus. He carried it across the room toward me, the way a waiter carries an entree. One hand, flat underneath, chin slightly raised. "Happy birthday, old man," he said, holding it out. "Freeloaders eat last in this house. Bon appétit." The room didn't go completely silent. That was the part that hit me hardest. A few people laughed. A few people looked away. Cassandra lifted her phone and pointed it at me. One man near the back, my neighbor Jim Hadley, who'd lived 4 houses down since 2009, who'd brought casseroles over when Carol died, pushed through to the edge of the group and said quietly, "Kyle, come on, man, that's enough." Kyle ignored him. I looked at the plate. I looked at my son's face. He was smiling with his whole mouth and none of his eyes. That specific smile that's performing for an audience. I took the plate from his hands. Not slowly, not deliberately. I just took it, the way you take something when it's being handed to you, because your hands respond before your mind gives them instructions. Then I set it down on the side table near the foyer, the one that had belonged to my mother. The wood was 60 years old, and it was the only piece of furniture in the room that no one had moved. I looked at Kyle for 3 seconds. I didn't speak. I turned and walked back toward the stairs. Behind me, I heard Kyle saying something to the room, something about me being sensitive, something about how he was just kidding, just a birthday joke. I heard Cassandra laugh again. I heard Jim Hadley's voice say something I couldn't make out. 13 steps to the top of the landing. I counted them the way I used to count everything, the way Carol had always teased me about. "You count stairs, Frank? Who counts stairs?" "I do," I'd told her. "It's just math. Everything's just math." I walked into my bedroom and closed the door. I turned the small lock above the handle that I hadn't turned in so long the mechanism was stiff. It gave with a click that was small and exact and final. I sat at the desk in the corner, the one I'd graded papers at for 2 decades, and I opened my laptop. The screen lit up my hands in the dark. Below me, the music kept going. The laughter kept going. The party kept going, like I had never walked into it at all. I opened a spreadsheet. I have been a methodical man my whole life. Carol used to say I approached emotion the same way I approached a long division problem. I wouldn't rest until every remainder was accounted for. She meant it affectionately, mostly. That night, in the dark, with a party going on below the floorboards of my own house, I let the methodical part take over completely. I opened 3 years of bank statements, 3 years of credit card records. I had kept every digital document the way I used to keep physical ones, organized by year, by month, by category. 31 years of teaching teenagers that the work you put into keeping things in order is the work that saves you later. Utilities. 3 years at an average of $240 a month for a house that had used 110 before Kyle and Cassandra arrived. Difference, $130 per month, $4,680 over 36 months. property taxes and homeowners insurance, which they had never offered to split and I had never asked them to. $6,200 over 3 years. Groceries and household supplies. I estimated conservatively, based on what I spent before they moved in versus the monthly average after. The difference was substantial, not less than $14,000 over 3 years. Then the credit card statements. I'd been avoiding them. I understood that about myself in that moment, that the avoidance had been deliberate, the way you avoid looking at a wound because looking at it makes it more real. I looked now. I went through every line for 36 months with the same focus I used to give final exams. Kyle's charges, electronics, video games, a gym membership he'd canceled after 6 weeks and then re-enrolled in twice. 3 charges from a custom bicycle retailer, totaling $2,300. A 4-day trip to New Orleans in October that I hadn't known about. Meals out restaurants I'd never been to. Restaurants I couldn't afford to go to while I was eating the groceries I was also paying for at home. Cassandra's charges, clothing stores, a spa in Green Hills, a hair salon in East Nashville with standing appointments every 6 weeks, an online shopping habit that showed up as a different merchant name almost every week, a $1,400 charge from a travel company I didn't recognize. I added them up twice, the way I'd always taught my students to check their work. Total support provided from my personal accounts over 36 months, $28,400. Conservative estimate. Total unauthorized personal charges to my credit card by Kyle, $19,870. Total unauthorized personal charges by Cassandra, $9,240. Combined unauthorized charges, $29,110. Grand total extracted from my retirement and savings while they lived in my house free of charge, $57,510. I saved the file as Callaway Financial Summary 2022, 2025, XLSX, and closed the laptop. Outside my window, Nashville was doing what Nashville does on a March night, cool, a little damp, the smell of something blooming that Carol always knew the name of, and I never remembered to ask. I sat with those numbers for a while, not with anger. Anger had burned off during the calculation. What remained was something cleaner, clarity. The mathematical certainty that the equation I'd been living in for 3 years had a solution, and I had just found it. By 11:30, the party was winding down below. By 1 in the morning, the house had gone quiet. I waited until 2, then I opened my laptop again, not for the spreadsheet, but for the legal pad document I started typing, a timeline. Every date I could recall, every amount, every incident. I typed until 4 in the morning. Then I slept for 3 hours in my desk chair because I wasn't ready to lie in the bed I'd shared with Carol and think about whether she'd be proud of me or heartbroken. Both, I decided at 7 when I woke up. She'd be both. I called my bank at 8 o'clock Monday morning. Pinnacle Financial, Nashville branch. I'd been a customer since 1993. The representative who answered was efficient and professional and did not ask unnecessary questions. I need to remove 2 authorized users from my accounts, I said. All of them, checking, savings, and both credit cards. She pulled up my profile. Kyle Mitchell Callaway, Cassandra Lynn Brewster. I confirmed both names. I confirmed my identity 4 ways. I listened to the confirmation numbers she gave me and wrote them on the legal pad. The changes will process within the hour, she said. Is there anything else? I'd like fraud alerts added. Text and email notification for any attempted access or transaction over $50. I'll add that now, Mr. Callaway. 1 call. 1 hour. $29,000 of access. Closed. I packed a bag while they were still asleep. 1 week of clothes, my toiletries, my laptop, the legal pad, a manila folder containing my property deed, my will, and the financial summary spreadsheet printed on 6 pages. I moved quietly. My bedroom was at the end of the hall, farthest from the room Kyle and Cassandra used. I'd listened to their footsteps above me for 3 years. I knew their patterns. They wouldn't surface before 10 on a weekday. At 8:45, I descended the stairs. The living room had been cleaned imperfectly, surfaces wiped, but a ring from a red cup still visible on Carol's coffee table, a wine stain on the rug near the fireplace that I photographed before I touched it. The purple and blue LED lights were still strung across the mantelpiece. Carol's photograph sat behind them like something trapped. I unplugged the lights. I tucked Carol's photograph into my bag. I left a note on the kitchen counter, held down with a coffee mug. Gone to see a friend in Brentwood for a few days. Back later in the week, I walked out the front door with my bag and got into my truck. The tulip poplar in the backyard was just beginning to show its early buds. Carol had said it would outlive us both. I hoped she was right. The Comfort Inn on Murfreesboro Pike was quiet on a Monday morning. I paid cash for 4 nights, declined the breakfast package, and carried my bag up to the second floor. The room was exactly what I needed. Anonymous, clean, facing away from the street. My phone started ringing at 11:43. Kyle. I set it face down on the nightstand and opened my laptop. I found her on the second search. Margaret Osei, attorney at law, Nashville. 15 years of practice in property disputes and elder financial abuse. Her client reviews mentioned she was direct, thorough, and did not charge for the first 15 minutes of a consultation. I called her office. She had a cancellation at 2 o'clock. Her office was off Charlotte Avenue, 3rd floor of a building that had been renovated sometime in the last decade. Modern furniture, diplomas on the wall, a credenza with a coffee maker that was better than the one in my kitchen at home. Margaret Osei was 53 years old, according to the Bar Association profile I'd read on the drive over, and she sat across from me with the focused attention of someone who had heard difficult stories and not been destroyed by them. "Tell me the situation," she said. "Legal pad open, pen ready. Start with what you own." I told her about the house, paid off, my name alone on the title, which had never been updated to include anyone else. Purchased 1,991, refinanced once in 2004. Final payoff, 2017. They're on the title at all? No. Written lease agreement. Any signed documents establishing their right to occupy? Nothing. Do they pay any rent? Any contribution to utilities, taxes, maintenance? Nothing. For 3 years. She made notes. Do they receive mail there? Yes. Use it as their permanent address? Yes. Then under Tennessee law, what you have is a tenancy at will with no formal agreement. That means you can revoke their right to occupy, but you have to do it properly. She looked up. 30 days written notice. Tennessee requires 30 days for an established occupancy, even without a lease. What if they refuse to leave after 30 days? Then we file for unlawful detainer. That takes another 2 to 4 weeks for a court date. A judge orders removal. If they still don't go, the sheriff enforces it. She paused. Most people leave when they receive formal legal notice. The official letterhead has a clarifying effect on the situation. I have documentation of financial damages, I said, and slid the printed spreadsheet across her desk. She glanced at it, then looked more carefully. She turned to the second page. She was quiet for a moment. 29,000 in unauthorized credit charges, she said. That's separate from the support expenditures. And you can document all of this? Bank statements, receipts? I'm a retired math teacher. I document everything. She set the papers down. The financial recovery is a separate civil matter from the property case. The notice to vacate stands on its own. You don't need to prove damages to remove them. The house is yours. But these records may be useful if they challenge the eviction or if we pursue restitution separately. What are the chances they fight the eviction? They'll threaten it. Whether they actually hire someone to file a counterclaim depends on whether they have the money and the nerve. From what you've described, I'd guess they have neither. She closed her legal pad. I'll draft the notice today. We send it certified mail and have a process server deliver a copy in person. That way they can't claim they never received it. 30 days from confirmed delivery, they're legally required to be out. If they're still there on day 31, then I file the unlawful detainer before noon and we're back here in 3 weeks with a court order. She met my eyes. Mr. Calloway, is there anything else I should know before I draft this? I thought for a moment. Not yet, I said, but I'm going to keep looking at my records. 3 years is a lot of paper to go through. She handed me a business card. Call me when you find something. My phone had 17 missed calls by the time I got back to the motel. Kyle, Cassandra, 2 numbers I didn't recognize, and one from my neighbor Jim Hadley. I listened to Jim's voicemail first. Frank, it's Jim. I wanted to call and check on you. What happened last night was not okay. I tried to say something to the boy. He brushed me off. You let me know if there's anything I can do. I mean that. I called Jim back. I told him I was fine, that I was handling things, that I appreciated him saying something. He said what Kyle did was disrespectful and that Carol would have had something to say about it that would have left a mark. That made me smile in a way I hadn't expected. I listened to Kyle's voicemails in order. The first, at noon. Dad, call me back. The cards are getting declined. There's probably some fraud thing. Just let me know when you can fix it. The second, at 1:15. Dad, seriously, both cards are blocked. Call me. The third, at 2:40. Where are you? You're not at the house. Call me back. The fourth, at 4:05. His voice lower, the performance starting to crack. Dad, look, about last night. I know it probably seemed. It was just a joke. We were all just joking around. You know how it is. Just call me. The fifth, at 6:15. You went to a bank? You removed us from the accounts? What are you doing? Call me right now. I deleted all 5 without responding. That night, I ordered a sandwich from a deli 2 blocks from the motel and ate it at the desk while reviewing the last 6 months of credit card statements I hadn't looked at carefully enough. It was the November statement that stopped me. A charge I didn't recognize. Experian credit monitoring, $29.95. I hadn't signed up for credit monitoring. I logged into my Equifax account. Hard inquiry, October 19th. A credit card application. Discover Bank. I hadn't applied for a Discover card. My stomach went cold in that particular way. It used to go cold when I was looking at a student's answer and realizing the error was deeper than I'd initially thought. I called Discover at 7:15 in the morning. Identity verification. Account lookup. Yes, Mr. Calloway. There was an application submitted October 19th in your name. Approved. Card mailed to your address on Clover Ridge Drive. Activated October 28th. Current balance, $11,340. I asked them to freeze the card immediately and transfer me to their fraud department. The representative there walked me through it with the practiced efficiency of someone who handles this call every day, which I realized, with a sinking weight in my chest, probably meant she did. By noon, I had filed the fraud dispute, filled out an affidavit, and confirmed that the card had been used primarily at retailers in the Green Hills and Brentwood area of Nashville. Clothing, restaurants, a furniture store, cash advances from an ATM on Hillsborough Pike. By 2 o'clock, I was at the Nashville Metro Police Department's Financial Crimes Division. The detective who took my statement was in his late 40s, gray at the temples, with the unhurried manner of someone who has stopped being surprised by human beings. He listened carefully. He asked clarifying questions. He asked who had access to my personal information, social security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name, the answers to the security questions Discover would have used to verify the application. My son and his girlfriend, I said. They've lived in my house for 3 years. All of that information is in documents in my home office. Your son? Yes. He looked at me steadily. Mr. Calloway, I want to tell you that the majority of elder financial fraud cases we see involve family members. It doesn't make it easier, I know. But I want you to know that you're not the first person who sat across from me in this situation. And you won't be the last. And what you're doing right now is the right thing. I thanked him. I drove back to the motel. I sat on the edge of the bed in that anonymous room, and I looked at Carol's photograph, which I'd propped against the lamp on the nightstand. We had talked once, about 3 years before she died, about what would happen to Kyle if something happened to us. She had said, and I remembered it so clearly, the way you remember things said in a kitchen on a Tuesday morning that turn out to matter, she had said. He needs consequences, Frank. We love him, but if we protect him from every consequence, we're not loving him. were disabling him. I had agreed with her. We had both agreed. And then she died, and I'd found myself alone in that house, and the agreement had gotten lost somewhere in the silence. I found it again, in that motel room, looking at her photograph. I called Margaret Osei. Identity theft, I said. Credit card fraud, $11,340. A pause. Have you filed a police report? This afternoon. Good. Mr. Calloway, this changes the nature of what we're dealing with. This is no longer just a property matter. This is criminal. I know. Do you want to press charges? I want to understand all my options first. Then come see me tomorrow morning. Bring the police report. I updated the spreadsheet that night. I stared at the new total for a long time. $57,510 plus $11,340. $68,850. Nearly $70,000. 3 years of a retired teacher's careful savings transferred to 2 adults who had handed me a plate of scraps at my own birthday party. The number didn't make me angrier. Somehow, it just made me quieter, more certain. The formal notice to vacate was delivered by process server on Thursday morning. I was not there when it happened, but Margaret called me afterward with what the process server reported. Kyle answered the door, read the letterhead, and closed the door without speaking. Cassandra had apparently been audible in the background, asking what it was. 30 minutes later, Kyle called me 14 times in a row. I listened to the voicemails that evening. The early ones were angry. You can't do this. This is my home too. I'll get a lawyer. You have no right. The later ones shifted. Dad, please. I know things got out of hand. The birthday thing. I was stupid. I was showing off for people, and it went too far. I know that. The last one, at 9:17 at night, was different from all of them. Quiet. The performance stripped away. Dad, I know what I did. The card thing. I know you know. I need you to call me back. Please. I played that one twice. Then I deleted it along with the rest. I drove back to Clover Ridge Drive on a Tuesday afternoon, 9 days after I'd left. My truck in the driveway, the tulip poplar still budding, the house exactly as I'd left it from the outside. Inside, the LED lights were gone from the mantelpiece. The wine stain on the rug had been cleaned, imperfectly. The kitchen was tidier than it had been in months. Kyle was in the living room when I walked in. Cassandra appeared in the doorway behind him. I didn't stop walking. I went to the dining room table, set my folder on the surface. Carol had refinished herself in 2008, and took out 2 documents. I slid one toward the chair where Kyle now sat. I held the second one out toward Cassandra where she stood in the doorway. 30 days from delivery, I said. That was last Thursday. You have 21 days to find housing and remove your possessions. Kyle grabbed the document. His face went through shock and then rapidly into something harder. This is insane. You hired a lawyer against your own father, against me, your own son. Read the document. I'm not reading the "this is my home." I grew up here. You grew up here as a child in a house I paid for. You've lived here for 3 years as an adult in a house I still pay for. Neither of those things gives you ownership. I kept my voice level, the same voice I'd used for 3 decades, explaining to 16-year-olds that their feelings about the answer didn't change what the answer was. The title has one name on it, mine. Cassandra looked at the notice in her hands. I watched the color leave her face in stages. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my responsibility to solve. We don't have anywhere. You're both in your 30s. You have 21 days. Kyle stood up. He was taller than me by 3 inches, and he'd used that physical fact to fill a room his whole adult life. You're doing this because of one stupid joke. One bad night, and you're throwing us out on the street. What kind of father does that? I looked at my son. I really looked at him, the way I should have been looking for 3 years, instead of looking away. Kyle, I said, I found the Discover card. The room went very still. I filed a police report on Monday. There's a detective at Metro Financial Crimes who has your name and Cassandra's name and $11,340 worth of transactions made on a card opened in my name without my knowledge or consent. I watched his face. That's identity theft and credit fraud under Tennessee code. It's a felony. Cassandra made a sound I didn't have a word for. Kyle sat back down. I also have a 3-year accounting of every unauthorized charge made to my Visa and my MasterCard using access I gave you for emergencies. $29,000. I have every statement. I'm an accountant's nightmare as a victim's son because I kept everything. Kyle's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The notice stands. 21 days. I picked up my folder. I recommend you both speak to an attorney. I went upstairs and closed my bedroom door. That evening, I installed 2 security cameras. One in the living room behind the bookshelf, one in the kitchen mounted above the refrigerator. Motion activated, recording to cloud storage. Tennessee law permits property owners to record common areas in their own home. I'd confirmed this with Margaret. I left written notice for Kyle and Cassandra the following morning, as required. That afternoon, I changed every lock in the house. Front door, back door, garage entry, my bedroom. When Kyle and Cassandra returned at 5 and found their keys wouldn't turn, I opened the door myself. The locks have been changed for security reasons, I said. You can come and go. You just don't get new keys. The house is being secured while you're still occupying it. Kyle stared at me for a long time. The anger in his face was doing something I'd seen before. In classrooms. In that moment when a student finally understood that no amount of argument was going to change the answer. The answer was the answer. He walked inside without speaking. 16 days before the deadline, Margaret called. I've been going through the materials you sent me, she said. I want to make sure you understand the full scope of what you have. The unauthorized credit card charges, combined with the fraudulent account, Mr. Calloway. This is a strong civil case, in addition to the criminal matter. If you pursue both, you're looking at potential recovery of the entire $68,000. Not guaranteed, but possible. What does pursuing both mean practically? It means more time, more process. The criminal case moves on its own timeline. The civil case we file separately. Kyle and Cassandra would be named as defendants. If they have jobs, Kyle told someone he got a position at a call center last week. I heard it through the kitchen vent. If they're earning income, a judgment becomes collectible. Wage garnishment if necessary. How long? Years, potentially, for the full amount. I thought about that. I thought about Carol saying consequences, and I thought about what kind of consequences were actually useful to a 34-year-old man who had never been required to face them. Let me think about it, I said. Take your time. The morning of move-out day, I woke at 5:30 and sat with my coffee on the back porch. The tulip poplar was in full early blossom. Carol had chosen it, she'd told me once, because it was one of the tallest flowering trees in North America. She didn't do things small, my wife. The rental truck arrived at 9. Kyle drove it. Cassandra's sister from Knoxville came with a borrowed SUV to help carry things. I stood in the front hallway with my phone, documenting every piece of furniture that came down the stairs, every box carried through the front door, every timestamp. At 1 in the afternoon, Kyle found me in the kitchen. He looked the way he'd looked at 12 years old, after Carol sat with him for 2 hours one night over a science project he'd been lying about not starting. Stripped down, not performing for anyone. Dad. He stopped in the doorway. I need to say something. I'm listening. The credit card. I knew it was wrong when I did it. I convinced myself you wouldn't notice, or that I'd pay it back before you did. Or, he stopped. There isn't a version of that that sounds good, is there? No. I know. He looked at the floor. I know I made it easy for you to cut me off because I never gave you a reason not to. And the party that was Cassandra's idea, the whole thing, the plate of food, she thought it would be funny, and I went along with it because I always go along with whatever she wants, and He stopped himself again. I'm not trying to blame her. I made my own choices. I looked at my son, the son Carol and I had raised in this house, in these rooms, under this roof. I could see her in his face the way I always could, in the shape of his jaw, in the particular set of his eyes when he was being honest. You're apologizing because you're facing consequences, I said. You said that yourself. You convinced yourself you'd pay it back. You weren't planning to come to me and confess. You weren't going to apologize until today, which is the day a truck is in the driveway and you have nowhere else to go. I paused. That's not remorse, Kyle. That's regret at being caught. Remorse is what you feel before the consequences arrive. He didn't argue with that. I'll give him that much. What happens with the detective? He asked. I haven't decided. He nodded slowly. Okay, go finish loading. He left the kitchen. I stood at the window and watched the tulip poplar and thought about Carol's voice saying consequences at a kitchen table that no longer existed. At 4:57, the truck pulled out of my driveway. Cassandra's sister's SUV followed. I stood on the porch and watched them go. Then I went inside and locked the door. My house. The first time in 3 years that those two words felt like what they were. I walked through every room. The dining room, Carol's table, clear and whole. The living room, the rug imperfectly cleaned, furniture back where it belonged. The upstairs bedroom they'd used, closet empty, carpet in need of vacuuming, a mark on the wall near the window that I photographed and wrote down. I came back downstairs and sat in the kitchen and called Jim Hadley. They're gone, I said. You all right? Yes. You want company tonight? Not tonight, I said, but Saturday. I'm going to cook. Tell your wife. 3 days later, Margaret called with a proposal. She'd made contact with Kyle and Cassandra through the attorney Kyle had eventually hired, a young man from a small firm in Antioch who had apparently advised his clients that their options were limited. Kyle is willing to discuss a restitution agreement to avoid the criminal charges proceeding, she said. He's proposing to repay the fraudulent credit card amount, $11,300 over 18 months. That's not the full amount. No, that's his opening. Send them this. I read her the terms I'd written out the previous evening. Full restitution of $68,850. Monthly payments of $650. Any missed payment triggers formal criminal prosecution for the fraudulent credit card account, in addition to civil filing for the full remaining balance. No flexibility, no renegotiation. At $650 a month, that's over 8 years, she said. Yes. You understand he'll be paying you until he's 43 years old. I understand that perfectly. There was a pause on the line, and I thought I heard the faint sound of a pen clicking. I'll send it today, she said. The confirmation came back 4 days later, signed by both Kyle and Cassandra, witnessed, notarized. Margaret filed it with the court as a consent agreement, which meant it was now a legal obligation with teeth. The first payment arrived the following month, $650, electronic transfer, 11:15 on a Wednesday morning. I sat at my desk and watched the notification arrive on my phone. Then I opened a new savings account at Pinnacle and transferred it there. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with it. There was a scholarship fund through the Nashville public school system for graduating math students who wanted to go into education. Carol had always given to it, small amounts, every year. I thought I might give it there. I thought she would find the particular irony of it satisfying. On Saturday, I cooked for the first time in months without resentment. Standing at Carol's stove in Carol's kitchen in the house we'd bought together in 1991, the house I'd paid off, the house that had my name on the title and now, for the first time in 3 years, felt like it again. Jim Hadley and his wife Susan came. My former colleague Dale Patterson and his husband, Margaret Osei, who had accepted my invitation with a warmth that surprised me. An older couple from down the street who'd sent a card when Carol died and whom I'd never properly thanked in the years since. We sat around the dining room table, Carol's table, and ate pot roast I'd started the night before, and bread I'd made from scratch that morning because it was Saturday and I had time, and no one was going to come downstairs and eat it before I got to the kitchen. Jim raised his glass partway through dinner. To Frank, he said, for knowing when enough was enough. We drank. Susan Hadley told a story about her sister's neighbor who had a similar situation with an adult stepchild, and how it had taken the woman years to do what Frank had done in days. Dale Patterson said that Carol had always said Frank was the most patient man she'd ever met, but that even patient men had a limit. Margaret said nothing, just smiled in the way of someone who knows what the person across the table has actually been through. After they left, I sat alone in the quiet. The furnace hummed. The tulip poplar stood in the dark backyard, invisible from the window, but there, the way Carol had always been there, even when I couldn't see her. I was 67 years old, sitting in my own dining room in my own house, in the city where I'd taught and raised a child and buried my wife, and been a math teacher and a father and a widower, and, for 3 years, a man who had let himself be smaller than he was. None of that was who I was anymore. I was a man who had kept his records, who had done the math, who had looked at the answer clearly, however long it had taken him to pick up the pencil, and written it down. That, Carol would have understood. That, she would have recognized as the man she married. My name is Frank Calloway. I'm 67 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I just reclaimed my life. If this story touched something in you, if you know someone living what I lived, or if you've been too patient for too long, I want you to leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you're carrying. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear tonight. And if you're not subscribed to Ember Vengeance yet, now is the time. There are more stories just like this one waiting for you.